guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm going to be doing a little review on a new battery monitor that someone's given me to have a look at. This is a battery monitor made by JUNCTEK and it's the KGF series, the FG140F. I'll put a link, or I'll do a screenshot now of where I bought it, where you can get it from AliExpress. So they're not sponsoring this video at all. They just said that they'd like to give me this monitor, try it out, see what I think and do a review on it. So it'll just be my opinion on what I think of it. And here it is here. Like I say, it comes from AliExpress if you're buying it. Took a couple of weeks to get here from China. It retails at £45. It has a coloured screen gauge on there, which is about 2.4 inches, I believe. We'll measure it in a minute. It has a module system as well, which also has Bluetooth connection for an app, an Android app on your phone, which is pretty good. It has a temperature probe can be put into this, which comes with it. That will do over temp, and it also, you can connect a relay to it to protect your battery from over voltage, over current, under voltage, and some other bits and pieces. And it has a data link as well. You can connect it to a computer to play around the data if you want to. And I believe you can also connect more than one module together. Daisy chain them somehow, but I've not gone into that. Anyway, so we'll have a look inside the box. Right, so I've had a little look at this already, the user manual. It's very clear to use. It's pretty good user manual, and it has different schematic drawings there on different ways of connecting it up. So you can connect it up as just the one battery in your van. There's another way to connect it up with your battery and a battery that runs the gauge, so it doesn't lose power if your battery dies or disconnects. And it also gives you another one for the relay, and then it gives you information about the Android app, which I'll explain later, but couldn't find that on the Play Store, but it has got a link here. Put that into Google and you'll get the app. So the module, hopefully that's coming out in focus. This is the part that goes by your battery. It has two data links on the side. One is for the gauge and one is for a computer. It's an RS485, or is it RS? Yeah, 485 link that you can connect to your computer if you want to get the serial data. And they do actually give you all the protocols for this in the manual, and I think you can download it online to learn about it if you're interested in that sort of thing. And the green connection here is for a positive in. So like the TR16 and most gauges, these need to have a positive from the battery to run all the time. They can't just run on the shunt, because the shunt's on a negative on the battery. So that gives you a positive in, and you can run that either on a separate battery, or you can run it directly off your battery, leisure battery in your van. On this side there's three outputs on this side. One is the temperature sensor, which is the bottom. The middle one is connected to the shunt, and the top one is an output for a relay. So you can set up a relay to disconnect the batteries if there's a problem with temperature or voltage or current and stuff. Right, so the gauge, it's quite a nice size gauge, put it right way round. The buttons are quite big and easy to use with big fingers like mine. I'm not sure whether these glow in the dark, but it's a nice display when it's up and running. And it's just one connection on the back, which is a data connection. And the mounting of it, it's got two little plastic clips either side to mount it into a box or something, or on your panel, and two little screw connections you can see there. Measurement wise, the whole unit with the outside flange part is 10 centimeters, and the height there is just over just under 6.5 centimeters, and the depth is about 2.5 centimeters. A little bit more on the depth because you'll have the plug on the back, so you want a bit more on that. Right, the shunt. Now the shunt's quite big. It's this gauge, which I didn't mention actually, will read 0 to 120 volts, and at 0 to 400 amps, and this is a 500 amp shunt, so it's quite big and bulky, which is ideal if you've got a van with big battery packs and couple of inverters and stuff running microwaves. You're going to probably want something this size. Just one plug on it to plug into the module, and then just the 2 large nut and bolts for your negative cable. All of it is brass, yeah, so it's pretty good. They give you some mounting brackets, which these pieces here. Now these bolt through the bolts like that, and then they give you 2 little holes on the side to be able to mount this. Alright, so there you go, that's one of the mounting bolt brackets put on. Not ideal really. I mean, I don't know why we have to, when we get all these shunts, well, we have to have things like this added on, because if this becomes loose at all, you could have a heat resistance point in there, a joint. So yeah, it's not ideal. I don't know why they can't extend this brass plate out a bit and have the bolt 2 holes in it for mounting these, rather than mucking around with add-ons like that. That's a bit of a downside, but that comes with all the screws and some little plastic spacers to be able to bolt all that onto the thing, because you do need to fix these. You don't want these rattling around your van, because that is your main negative terminal to the battery. And then there's a load of cables. So we've got the data cable, not sure how many meters there. I reckon it's approximately 5 meters there on the data cable. I'm not sure what plug that is. You might be able to recognise it. Looks like the telephone plugs that you get. You can probably look this up and get an extension to this data cable if you need it. And I don't know how long you can run the data cable before you lose data to your gauge. Now 5 meters from the module to this is quite a long distance anyway, and I expect you could easily increase that by another 5 probably before you start getting problems, but I've never tried it myself. And you've got a cable for your relay, a cable for the shunt to the module, and a temperature probe. Now this is quite handy, having a temperature probe, because a lot of the monitors out there, they say they can do temperature sensing, which they do, and then they charge you an extra 5 or 10 quid for the temperature probe. They don't actually give it with the module, which is, so it's nice for them to do that really. Yeah, so what we do now is I'll get it all connected up. We'll have a play with it on a test bed in my den, and then we'll see how it runs, if it's any good. Right, so for testing this gauge, I'm going to be using my old Green Power NDS AGM battery. This is a really new battery, come with my van when I bought it, so it's only had it since April, and we've very rarely used the battery because we swapped it out for lithium. I've had this running now on my Victron power supply for a while. It's already gone into float. There's no current going into the battery because I've checked it on the app, so it is at 100% charge at the moment. So that's the battery I'm going to be using, and for testing the load I'm going to be running it on my light box over here, which is a grow light box I've been mucking around with for growing vegetables in lights, and this pulls around 4 amps, so that'd be a good enough load to trickle charge off that battery and see how the monitor works. And for recharging I'll use the BlueThooth, I'll use the Victron charger to recharge. I will put one of these watt meters on, see how this goes as well, but these are fairly new, just see the accuracy between the two when we're doing this test. Alright guys, so I've got a basic test circuit set up on my bench. I'll go through all the bits and pieces that I've got set up, show you how it works, and then how to set up the gauge for initial setup. So I'll just grab the camera and have a look through. Right, so as I said before, I've got the 100 amp hour AGM battery. I've got the temperature probe just sitting up here. Normally you'll probably tape this to your battery if you want to keep the temperature of the battery, or keep it in the battery compartment. On my positive side I've got a isolator just to be able to isolate the circuit in case anything goes wrong. That's going down to a fuse. I've got a watt meter here which will give me ampage and amp hours of anything coming out of the battery, and it's not a two-way watt meter, so it'll only read coming out, so it'll give me an indication of how good the gauge is calibration wise, because I've used these before and this is quite accurate where I've tested it before against my Fluke. Positive and negative bars here. My Victron charger is connected directly into these positive and negatives to charge the battery back up, This is just like a distribution, positive and negatives, for my light box, which is controlled by a switch. Similar to if your van, you've got an isolation switch and a distribution box. And then all that turns on my Arduino and my light box, so it controls out of the battery. This pulls about 5 amps for testing this circuit. On the negative side, comes down to the shunt. I haven't bolted it to the floor, just connected it up. So that just goes into the negatives that I showed earlier. The control box, I've got a positive coming out of here, which you need, same as the TR16, you need a positive into these. I'm taking this directly off the distribution, which is the non-switch side of the distribution, so when it's switched off like it is now, you're not losing a positive to your gauge. So that should be, if you're doing this in your van, I'll take that direct off the battery via an inline fuse. Because of the size of this cable, you probably put a 1.5mm cable into here, so you only want, say, a 5 amp fuse on that. The telecom connection here goes straight into the back of the gauge, and that's that done. On this side I have the temperature probe connected in the middle. Oh no, sorry, temperature probes here on the right, furthest right hand side. The middle one is the shunt connection, which just plugs straight into the shunt. The cable's given, not very long cable, but then this would probably be in your battery compartment anyway, so that makes it a lot easier. And then the last one over here is my relay out. Now for the relay out, I'll explain it later. I haven't got a big enough relay to connect onto the cables. If you've got a 100 amp hour battery and you're going to run 50 amps off it for an inverter, you're going to want a relay that can take that 50 amps. I've only got a little tiny one, but I'll show you how that works later on. Right, so for the gauge, the initial setup, as you can see, we've got 13.6 volts from the battery. We've got 0 currents coming out. Now I've already calibrated and played with this, so it's 0, and I'll show you how you calibrate that. When you first switch this on, you might find that you have 0.1, 0.2 of an amp flickering around because you haven't calibrated it. So that's one of the things you need to do. These little arrows here, I can't remember what, we'll find out in a minute when we power it all up. I think the red one now is the current going into the battery, changes colour, and the other arrow is the if you're pulling power out of the battery. Amp hours remaining is 100 amps hours. You need to set that up to your specific battery as well. We've got wattage and kilowatt hours if you need it. We've got percentage, how much percentage you've got on the battery, 100%. I've had this battery charging now all morning, so I know it's 100%. Amp hours used, I think that is 0.07. You see that go up later on. Battery time remaining, that'll calculate that when we start pulling some power out. I never trust these remaining because it'll always change depending on if you've got things switching on and off all the time. And I'm not quite clued up on that internal resistance, whether that's the battery resistance, I don't know. I'm not saying that I need to know. We've got on up here, which means my battery protection is on, which I can show you later. Temperature probe is sitting there at 18 degrees. I'm assuming if you can see that. I'll just touch the temperature probe. I'll put my hand on the temperature probe. And you see it's just jumped up 20 degrees, so you can see how that works. And I'm assuming that's a clock, 14.18, which hasn't been set up. Right, for the phone app, you can supposedly scan this and get the app. I've done it a few times and it just gives you the zip file, which is the app as a programmable with all the code in that, which is great if you want to be doing app developments and you want to look at it. I wasn't sure how you install it from that. The same with the IP address, gives you the same thing. I couldn't find the app on Play Store by searching, but they have got the address here in the manual. So the best thing you can do, and I'll put this in a link below if anyone wants to play with this, is to type in that into Google search engine and it'll take you straight to it, and then just follow the instructions to install the app. Right, so with the app, you have to, when you first go into it, mine's already connected, but you'll have a search button up here. Search for your battery and it'll come up there. Click on it and you'll be connected. And it's a pretty good app. I'm well impressed with the app and the whole gauge actually on this from what I've been testing. So the on button up here, which you can click on to turn on and off, is your battery protect relay. When it goes into a power protection, so it kills the power to the van, that will go to red and say that it's gone into protection, and it won't clear until you go into the app or into the gauge to clear it. So even if the temperature goes up too high, that goes into over temp. We'll go for this later. If the temperature drops, it's still staying over protection until you clear it yourself. Voltage, you can set the gauge by clicking on it, and then we can use this graph to move up and down, because it's set to 0 to 120 when you first get it, and I brought it down to 14 volts just by dragging my finger all the way down to 14 and then click OK, and that sets the gauge circle to 14, so that it gives you a better indication of your battery voltage. Now you might want to put that a little bit higher. If you've got 14.5, and actually that's 15 would have been better, because you can charge at 14.4 on AGMs. So we'll go for 16, and it gives you a little bit over. There you go. So that's how you set up the voltage on the gauge. Current, the same thing. You click on it, and you can set the input current. You can go 0 to 400 amps. I've set mine to 20 for what I'm doing. I'm doing a small current of 5 amps in, and the charger can put 10 amps in. Can't get it now, but with an AGM we'll be lucky to get that. So I'll set that to 20, so that gives you 20 amps going for charge and 20 amps the other side going for discharge, and the needle moves up and down depending on what you got. You've got to gain what is your power, the electrical consumptions in kilowatt hours if you need it. You can clear your current clear there to set up your current, and you can clear your data on here as well. You've got your temperature probe, temperature there, which again you can set. I haven't bothered touching that. I've left it 100 on there. Run time, this is the amount of time the meter's been up and running, I expect. I don't know whether you can set that or anything. I don't know what that does really. Gauge there showing I'm at 100%, and I've got 100 amp hours left in the battery, and you can set this on here if you need to, but I've already done it through the gauge. So all the settings I did on the gauge you can do on this app. Down here it's got the amp hours remaining or elapsed, sorry, battery time left, and that resistor thing I didn't know. Curve wise, I haven't really used this much, but it does give you a slow real-time curve of your current and your voltage. And down the bottom here, if you click on the history, which is off, I'll turn that on, it will give you the history and you can play back on it. I haven't got much history because I've cleared the data on here at the moment. Settings, much easier to do your setup through here than through the gauge, really. This is the input over voltage protection. You've got input under voltage protection, input positive over current protection, input external over temperature protection, input over power protection, input negative over current protection, and that's it for protection. Quite a lot of things there really, isn't there? The relay, you can switch it on and off. Set time delay, don't know what this is. I'm thinking, I tried to look it up, I couldn't find anything, that this might be something to do with the data, if you want to connect your computer to it. The same with this input protection, revert time. I'm not sure on that either. If anyone knows, comment below. Setting the address, it's got to be something to do with the code and firmware update. And then a bit about the people and the version, and that's it. Back to main menu. So that's the app and the gauge. What we do now is I'll switch the power on my switch over here. So I'm just going to switch this on, which is powered everything up now. So you can see I've got a light box in here. Put in at least 5 amps I think, or 6 even. Alright, so now you can see we're pulling 6.5 amps coming out of the battery. It's got a little blue arrow pointing outwards on there. On the app we're pulling 6.4 amps as well, and you can see the needle's gone to the left on discharge. We're discharging out from the current from the battery, and there's a little blue symbol going across from the top of the battery there to show we're pulling power out of the battery. And 83 watts coming out of the battery. Right, and just to show the difference between the two, you've got 6.4 on the gauge, and on my meter it's showing, when it comes round, 6.4 amps at the top left hand side there. This also shows wattage as well, but it's probably not as accurate. Well, 83 watts on there, 82.4 on there, so they're actually spot on. So gauge wise it's pretty accurate. What I'll do is I'll leave this running for a little while now so we can drop some of this percentage power, and then I'll flick on the Victron and see if it's charging up. In the meantime, while I'm waiting to do that, I'll go over the protection side so you can see that working. Right, so for the battery protect, you've got this cable coming out which gives you three cables. You've got a yellow, red and a black. Now they do a wiring diagram, which I'll try and put a screenshot up or see if this works, like this, which is using an external DC power supply into the gauge to control the relay for the disconnect. Now that's great if you've got two power supplies, but if you're running a van with one battery, then you're not going to be able to do that easily. And if you do put a 9 volt or 12 volt battery, it has to be the same voltage as the relay, but if you do put a power supply battery on there, you've got to then worry about keeping that charged. So I didn't like that idea. So I did some readings and it's quite simple really. Out of the red is a 12 volt positive, continuous positive. It never switches off no matter what happens in normal position. The ground is just ground and it's permanently ground, and the yellow becomes a ground. Well, it's always a ground, but it's switched, so it switches on and off. So in normal conditions, when everything's working fine, you'd have 12 volts out in the red, yellow in the ground to a relay, and the relay would be on all the time. When it goes into a protection, like an over temp section, the yellow ground would open up and then the relay drop out. So it's quite simple. The only downside with that is that the relay's on all the time, which means it gets hot. And now I've only got a 12 volt relay, and the voltage out of here is almost, well, it's 12.8 at the moment, but when charging I've had it up to 14.4, which is making this get hot. So I can't leave it on permanently, but for test purposes it'd be fine. If I was installing this myself, I'd look at fitting a knock gauge which will invert the voltage out so that it will turn this on off instead of on, so it's not permanently on, and to disconnect it, turn it off. Never got that right way round. Anyway, so I just put the cable in, show it working, and at the moment you can see my disconnect is switched off. So if I switch that on, it's just brought this relay on. You hear a fan in the background, there's nothing to do with this, it's just a light box. So relay's on now and everything should be under protection. Now if I go into the settings again to set the temperature, if I go for over temperature, it's the easy one to show, and I set that to 25 degrees, click OK, you can see it's got 25 in there. Go back to the main and I've got 18 degrees on here. What I'll do is I'll bring the gauge over to show it if I can. Right, so you can see the LED lit up in the background here, which means this relay's on. If you had this now connected on your positive, don't forget that it'll have to be on a disconnect that hasn't got the power for this power supply. They'll have to come the other side of the disconnect, and that's probably why they do the external power supply. But the amount of current this pulls, I shouldn't think it causes an issue really. Yeah, so with the relay on, if this was connected there to my positive, it'd be supplying the van quite happily. You'd have no problems. Temperature's at 18 degrees on the gauge, so if you keep an eye on that temperature, if you can see it, I'll just leave my finger there so you can see it. I'll just put my finger on the probe, you see that temperature go up and it'll go into protection. 19, 20, need warmer hands. Right, there you go, it's now gone red on there for over protection, and padlock, I don't know whether that means it's disconnected, but you can see the LED on here has also gone off. We're at 26, 25 now. I'll let the temperature drop down a bit. Right, so it's 24, so it's below the temperature of the protection, but you can see it still hasn't switched anything back on again. And on the app, it's also gone red on the over temp protection. Now I'm going to reset that by pushing that over temp protection, and if you do this whilst it's still above the temperature, it won't let you reset it. So for now, you can click it to off, click it back to on again, and you can see everything's gone back to normal. So right, so that was the settings for over temp. I'm just looking through all the settings and looking at the app and through here, there's nothing to protect for under temperature. which is a shame, because the lithium batteries is the one thing that you'd want to have where the temperature drops down to near zero. You'd want it to shut its system down so it's not charging. Although you can't charge lithium, you can probably pull off the lithium, so it probably wouldn't be as advisable. But you could have used it on your charging circuit to be able to disconnect the charger if it's gone to too low a temperature. So that's not on there at the moment. Maybe if they're listening, they might put a firmware out and an update to do a negative temperature. You'd want something where you can set it down to 0 or maybe even minus, and make it a relay disconnect, so you can disconnect the charging circuit from any lithium batteries. Right, so I can't really test the low voltage because I'd have to drop the voltage on the battery too much to test that, or put a massive resistor in, which I haven't got. And right, one more thing I can try to do is do an input over voltage protection. Now normally your Victron charger charge at about 14 volts. We're at 12.74 at the moment on the gauge. So if I set this to 13.2, which isn't the ideal voltage because you could charge at that voltage, but it's just for testing purposes. So we've got a protection now of 13.2 volts. We're at 12.74. I'm just going to turn my Victron on. So with the Victron charger on, which will take a couple of minutes to start up, or a couple of seconds to start up, it's just going through its test. There you go, the voltage is going up. There you go, 13.2, and it's gone into over voltage protection. Again, on there, it's got over voltage protection. I'm not going to be able to come out of this now because the voltage is high. So if I try to reset that off, it's going to keep going into over voltage protection. For me to get out of this now, I'd have to go into this, bring this up to a higher voltage, and then I can come back out of it. So while the Victron's on, I'll just show you this as well. A 99% capacity on the gauge, and we've got 2.2 amps now going into the battery because it's running on bulk on the Victron controller. Again on here, 2.2 amps going into the battery, and it's showing the battery symbol down here of going in. Before it was up top, now it's at the bottom. Going to the curves, you can see on the current I've got a slight flicker on the current, which is probably where we switched the Victron on, and same with the voltage. The only thing with these graphs I did notice is that they're 0 to 400 on this side, and for the voltage 0 to 120 volts this side, and you can't change that parameters from what I can see, which is another bit of a shame really, because you can't, being small currents, like I'm only putting 5 amps, and some vans, my van, you probably maximum you put is 20 amps. Having a 400 amp gauge is not much help really. History's on, so you can, so you pull the thing across to see the history, and you can see where again with the current it's not much help with the way it's set up, but you can see where I switched things on and off. Right, I switched the Victron off again because it's just going to bring that back up to 100%. Right, so that's the Victron off. You can see we're pulling the blue arrow now going out, 7 amps. Voltage has dropped back down to normal voltages for this AGM, and there the symbol's changed over to load on the symbol here. Like I say, so far I'm very impressed with this gauge. If I didn't have the TR16 in my van, I probably would fit this. I don't like the colour of this sort of setup. Doesn't look as nice as the TR16, but then you've got more information and it's a better screen for using the setup on this. It's easier to use this than it is the TR16, that's one good thing. You could put this in a cupboard and it'd be great, and the TR16, you only get that downside of that, if I was comparing it, is the TR16 gauge, when it lights up, is extremely bright and lights up the whole van, whereas this one probably wouldn't. But the bonus of this one with the app, which is brilliant, is this could go in the cupboard. You don't really need the gauge, you could just use the app. And when you think that Victron, which is I'm going to compare it against the price, if you had to buy a Victron smart shunt that gives you the app and gives you the gauge, you're looking at a few £100 I expect now. The smart shunt I'm pretty sure is about £100 on its own, and that's without the gauge. Right, I'm just going to pull my relay out because it's getting warm. Like I say, if you do this you need to get quite a good robust relay, or do one which can invert the voltage on the relay. There's probably different ways of doing it. Right, so I've been running it for a little while now. I'm down at 97% on the battery. Same with the gauge, it's showing 97%. Oh, doesn't click on anything. Amp hours left is 2.4 amp hours, and I'm putting 6.6 amps. And again on my gauge over here I'm putting 6.58 to 6.6 amps. I can't use that for the amp hours because we did a bit of charging with the Victron, so it'd be out of gauge now. But at the beginning it was reading pretty accurate. If I switch my load off, which is that one, turns the fans and lights off. There you go, current's dropping down to 0 amps, and it should all settle down. I'll just switch that back on again. Right, so I'm going to switch my Victron on and show you that charging now. Right, so my Blue Spark Victron's just switched it on. It takes a couple of minutes for it to go through self-test to get it up to putting the charge out. It's on normal for lift AGM setting, 14.4 volts roughly, and it's gone into bulk charge straight away because it's just switched on. And down here on the gauge we're putting 13.13, that'll go up over time. Got to remember that my Victron is also running that load. 2.5 amps going into the battery now, and I'll switch off the load. You hear it in the background. That's the load gone off, and there it goes up to 14.3, 14.4 volts because we've got no load now on the battery, and 7.7 amps going into the battery. Now just a little bit about the AGM batteries, which I've said before in my previous vlogs. This is pulling quite a bit of current at the moment because we're on bulk, and that'll drop off quite quick soon to absorption. And because I'm at 97% on the battery, it will drop down to float voltage before it gets. By the time it gets 98%, it goes to float, and it'll take probably all day to get that up to 100%. Because of the way AGMs have an internal resistance, what I normally do is switch the thing on and off again for test purposes, just to get this battery fully charged. So I'm not going to be able to get this fully charged for this vlog because this will take forever. At this sort of current rate it'd be great, and then that'd be only if it stays in bulk charging, which I expect that'll drop out in a minute. Right guys, so that's my review of this KG F series gauge by JUNCTEK. I'll put a link down below if you want to go to that to get these. What do I think of it overall? I think that they're a pretty good gauge really. It does a lot more than what the TR16 does for the same sort of price, especially with the mobile app. I mean, you can't really beat that really for the 45 quid. Quite a good delivery, good packaging. It's been accurate, and all the testing I've done on it so far. It's good that it's got the battery disconnect as well. It would be nice to have the low temperature disconnect. It's something that they might do in future. We'll see if they get back on that one. The user manual that comes with it is really easy to understand. It's easy to follow for connecting it up and follow through for the instructions. And so, all in all, it's a pretty good gauge. I would definitely be getting myself another one of these because I want that one down here. I need one down my allotment where I've got a battery system and solar system down there, so it'd be nice to have one of these down there. And I'll probably go for this rather than the TR16 purely because I like the app set up. And my parents will probably want one as for their caravan as well because I've been talking to them about getting a gauge, so this is quite a nice one. So yeah, let us know what you think. Please give us a thumbs up and subscribe, and any new products I do get, or any new mods to the vans or destinations we're going to go, I'll do some more vlogs. We should be away soon next weekend over in Essex, so staying at a place. I'll do a little vlog of the campsite we're going to be staying at.